Hey everybody, welcome to week 5 of our conversation on Isaiah. Yeah, that's it. I did it. I had a pop-up that usually I make sure that it's streaming live on YouTube, and then I forgot to do that, so I'm checking right now. So go ahead, talk.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Isaiah again.
It's Isaiah guy. Okay. This is exciting.
I think we reached the point where when all 5 are together.
It needs an adjustment. We need to figure out how
we're
to.
still figuring it out.
I agree. Anything crazy in the world this week? I don't know. Sometimes I
What?
start
Really? That started to interview?
Wow.
Tell us
Hey,
life stories.
We do have 40 pages of notes
I know.
for this week.
I know.
Why is Isaiah is, it is narrative-ish, but it's prophetic words to a group of people. Today in 37, 38, 39 is the story that is also in 2 Kings 20. Also in Chronicles, Second Chronicles, there's declaration 2 of Second Chronicles, right?
Yep.
Hezekiah surfaces, and the biggest, that's strong words, but I think a huge encouraging part of it is that here there's repeated declaration that Hezekiah was as good as they came.
Yeah, the best king. The best of all the kings.
Yeah, and there was a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can Google it. But
a lot of good kings or a lot of kings?
A lot of kings.
There were.
Yeah.
There were not a lot of good kings, actually.
No. But the thing, actually, again, it speaks to the hope of Isaiah is not necessarily that Hezekiah as the best king was perfect, but actually that Hezekiah as the best king also has had some issues. And again, this book of this prophetic writing of warning to failure, to come alive, to work on what is not just external, but what's internal. Hope is not out of personal perfection, but it's out of grace that comes, redemption that comes. Even judgment and consequences is part of the hope process. And the good king is not absent of it. We come to this moment in the text where there's this declaration of judgment. Hey, there's going to be, because of what you've done, there's going to be incredible hardship coming in the future. It's going to come to your ancestors down the road. And Hezekiah goes, not for me. No biggie.
At least I don't have to deal with it. I know. I was reading that and just kind of reading some of other people's thoughts about it, and it was just the selfish moment of he's content, he has peace and security because it's not going to be when he's alive, and then his son is the worst king, so it's what follows him is terrible. And I don't know, I think it's just really hard because you read in Second Chronicles, it just talks about how great he was thoughtful, he was faithful, he was obedient, he did all the things that he worshiped, he sought God and worked wholeheartedly. There's just all these things that were good about him. And then he helped them escape Assyria. And then he got sick and was supposed to die. And he asked God to intervene. And he lived for 15 more years. And this is when it all broke down. At the end of this, all of a sudden there's pride.
Yeah, I wish it was not the common human experience, was that there's desperate prayers. The Assyrians are about to oppress them, take them, and he turns to God, and there's incredible provision. And then, he's sick, and then the basically the diagnosis was that he was going to die from this thing, and then God grants him 15 additional years. Huge answer to prayer, but then just the forgetfulness that's the human experience.
Yeah, because he could have. He responded in this once. So he showed Babylon all their wealth, all the good things that they had, and then all of a sudden Babylon's the prophet Isaiah's well, they know this now, so they're going to want this. They're going to want this for their own later, and his pride is what got in the way. But he asked God for all of these things. He asked God to save them from Assyria. He asked God to give them 15 more years, and God said yes. But then in this moment, where he's there's going to be consequences from what you did, instead of asking God in that moment to say, please, make a different way. He's not worried about it because it's not going to be on his shoulders. It's his grandchildren and his son that are going to have to deal with this. Yeah. And it's such a shock to the system. Why why do you go? I mean, you asked God for 15 more years of life and you got that. But then this prayer, he's just content. Like in this moment, he's not going to ask for that.
Do you think, I was thinking about this, just going through this week, is there something in him, like if you give him the benefit of the doubt, he's like, I've gotten so much from God already. I shouldn't take any more. I don't think that is the perspective, but could that be part of his thinking?
I feel like I don't know, it's really hard for me to think that way, because I feel like if something like this was my fault and I knew that like future generations were going to have to pay for what I've done, I would feel immense guilt. Like, right? Wouldn't you feel terrible? Like,
well, I would like to think that, but I think Hezekiah was a great king and he didn't.
I know. I just don't. That's what I don't. I'm like, what flipped the switch here? Like, was he getting old and ill? Like, something wasn't going well in his mind? I'm just.
Well, I think
it's so crazy how he was seen as so great, and then all of a sudden, just at the last moment, blew it.
Yeah. It shows also the availability of insecurity.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is pretty, you'd think if anybody should not feel insecure, it would be a king. But it sure seems when it wasn't even the king of Babylon, it was the son, the servants of the son of the king of Babylon. It was like, come on in, let me show you my shiny things.
So does security bring complacency, bring laziness? Like, so just Hezekiah, right? There was insecurity, and then there was the moment where he went, oh, I'm secure. Like, none of this is going to happen. There's going to be peace. Cool. And then he was just there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, is there a positive moving forward and growth to insecurity?
Well, I do think insecurity can nudge us to pull God close. And here is a moment where insecurity was causing him to pull the Babylonians or their favor close. He didn't want to die and lose to the Assyrians.
No.
And he reached out to God. He didn't want to die because of his ailment. And so he reached out to God. So something changed.
It's just crazy to me. It's a hard pill for me to swallow, like just reading it and thinking how often he's talked about as the best king and how he's so faithful and he did all this stuff. And this is how it ended. He set the next
peace and security in
his lifetime. Yeah. But he set the next generation up to fail. Like they knew Babylon was, I mean, I'm not saying that God would have even.
Do you think he knew that though?
I feel like, he knew that they were going, I mean, at least the prophet said that it's going to happen, that Babylon was going to come and take over.
Yeah.
I mean, and I feel like in the past, he's trusted the prophets. So I feel like he was told what was going to happen. So I do think he knew. Maybe he didn't understand the consequences, or like maybe he did. He asked too much. So he was like, all right, I can't ask for another thing. Or maybe he thought his son deserved it. I don't know. Like it turned to like, I think the next king he was 12 years old when he became the king, Manasseh, and he was the worst king. And so it's like, I don't know. I feel kind of dumbfounded in it. Like what happens that shifts things so drastically.
I think, like you said, the insecurity does bring reliance, and then all of a sudden he became bulletproof.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. 15 years, nothing can touch me.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Because God said.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Woo.
Maybe, that's interesting. Because we did talk about that, like the feeling of suddenly being told you have 15 more years, and how do you feel? You feel when you think you're about to die and you're told you have 15 more years, and how would any of us in this room feel if someone was like, you only got 15 years, and like how that shakes a person?
Well, it's a different experience if you are in your 80s and you're told you have 15 more years, and if you're 19.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
It's been part of our thought process. We've talked about it a couple different times in this, is that future self, and here this was beyond even future self, is it is very, very hard to change or adjust life or to be empathetic or compassionate or considerate to future self.
Yeah.
And this is a piece of that. That last two lines of chapter 39, your descendants are going to have incredible hardship. And then this was the word of the Lord spoken to Isaiah, verse number 8, and he goes, "Nah, it sounds good. It's fine.
Yeah.
There will be peace and security in my lifetime." Again, when we measure, maybe this goes back to the Chronicles celebrating of him as a king, is that, if you do have a legacy that while you live, things were really good, do we have, I don't know if we have a modern or historic legacy that goes beyond our own lifetime. And it's speaking to the value of that, is that we should realize that who we are and what we're doing is not just impacting us now. And we probably, each of us, have family experience of people, great great grandparents or great 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 grandparents that we're walking in their legacy, that could be surrounding faith or industry or living in this country, or all these different things are the decisions that were made 150 years ago, which probably almost all of us don't really have real context of what those decisions were, but we're walking and living in them.
I think so. This is in response to you, but also going back to where I've been broken in this whole story. I was just looking in Second Chronicles, and it talks about, so it says, in those days Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death, and he prayed to the Lord, who answered him and gave him a miraculous sign. But, and this is at the point of this is when he was given 15 more years, Hezekiah's heart was proud and did not respond to the kindness shown him. Therefore the Lord's wrath was on him and Judah and Jerusalem. Then Hezekiah repented of the pride in his heart, as did the people of Jerusalem. So the pride issue started then, and then it happened again. So it's like, it's interesting how he was seen as this great ruler. He's seen as all of these things, but he definitely was, when he asked for God to heal him, he was wrestling with pride. And then again, when Babylon came, he was wrestling with pride. And it's just this whole thing of how pride can be so destructive when you're not really working through it. And like future self, like how does that impact? Like, I feel like the whole pride comes before the fall kind of a thing. Like when you're not realizing your own pride, and then all of a sudden things fall apart on you. It's, I don't know. I think it just, it feels like a shock because everything was going great. That's why you're prideful.
I feel like we talked about this a little bit ago, a couple weeks ago maybe. But this, because we talked about pride, and then we were just talking about insecurity, and they're two sides of the same coin, essentially. Yeah. Like the pride and insecurity both they feel like they should be opposite ends of the spectrum, but in reality they're what happens when you're so self-focused.
They feed each other.
You're so self-focused on what you're missing or what you lack that you become insecure, or you're so self-focused that you're proud of what you do and you become prideful. They're really the same posture, and it's just your outward circumstances dictate whether you're insecure or prideful in any situation. And so I think like Isaiah's call to Hezekiah is about, like, it's not about you. It's not about all what you think or what feels better or what feels safe in this moment. There's something more, but obviously it doesn't respond. But.
Well, I think Matthew 14, Matthew 15 bring some perspective to, and Jesus in relationship with the disciples. In Matthew 14, the grouping that Matthew writes these is there's a lot of intentionality in it. Jesus feeds 5,000 people, and there is a marveling. There's their disciples held the 12 baskets of leftovers in Matthew chapter 14, and it had to be, I don't know how it could be more tangible. Matthew 15, it wasn't the next day, but in the writing of Matthew, it's intentional that it's right next to it. Here's another moment where there's thousands of people gathered. He spends 3 days with them, and it's all like a pretty remote place. He didn't want to send them away to faint, to suffer. And again, Jesus says, "You feed them." And then again, it's the same. If these stories were in different gospels, I think there would be a perspective that says, well, they're just telling one story from a little bit different perspective. But it's the intentionality of it being both in Matthew to go, it's like irony, and it's so weird that the disciples go, it's impossible, how could this happen? And again, they are fed, and there was, again, baskets of leftovers after the people. And you're holding these baskets of leftovers. And I feel like that the narrative in the next chapter, it could be, again, here we are again. This time it was 7,000 people, and Jesus fed them again. And so while this miracle is about Jesus, God's provision, I think a central part to the story, the narrative, is the disciples' experience, is that Jesus entrusted them to be a part of the miracle, and they also, at the end of it, they would go, well, this could never happen again. And I feel like that's part of Hezekiah's experience as well, is that was a cool miracle. And I feel like I walk in that. I love the miraculous provision of God, but I can walk very certain that it'll never happen again.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you mean by certain that'll never happen again?
It's not a matter of like not taking it for granted, but I feel like my faith says, yeah, it was good while it lasted. And I couldn't pile up that degree of hope or faith or trust, and it comes to its insecurity and pride being piled up in that.
Yeah, I think one tool to help with that for me is to try to like lower the bar of the things that I understand God to be working in or doing.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we like
not as a good thing, right? That's lowering the bar of what God's involved in doesn't necessarily healthy.
No, in a good way of like, because I think it's easy like when you have, a big moment, like a big need is met, you go, God was there.
Oh yeah.
To lower the bar of like something small. I can't think of it.
But like say that there's purpose in this day.
Yeah. To see the value of God's work in the moments where it's easy to not see God at work. I don't know.
Yeah,
no, that's good.
a big thing.
It's that like opening your eyes to see all the moments, and I feel like it's such a shift in perspective to see, okay, how is God at work in this moment? And it's like I feel like in the Bible when it talks about praying all the time or always being in prayer, like that's that. Like, I mean, I feel like that's part of that. It's just this moment where you're seeing what God's doing and you're asking Him to be a part of it and walking with Him and all of the things. And I just feel like I like that.
I feel like that's like a theme mentally for me that I've been thinking about is like lowering the bar of faith, not to have less faith, but to actually see it real. Like, be willing to pray for things that
feel silly.
Me a year ago would be like, that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, and that is exactly, that's what's under the feet of Hezekiah, is that there couldn't be something more urgent than the Assyrians knocking on the door to take you. You're laying on your deathbed. There couldn't be something more severe. And then a moment they go, hey, someday, for people that aren't yet in a land far, far away, you just go, okay, well, God, they should have faith in that moment.
Yeah, put it on them.
Put it on them, or to just think it's not as big or significant because what's under your feet is okay. And being lulled asleep is that's also a theme in faith. Yeah. It's so easy to just have intense faith when it's needed, or when it's faith when it's not.
Yeah, or like it's your moment and you need to have faith right now versus somebody else. Yeah. I think too, like in Isaiah, we see over and over again people having pride and people oppressing people and not thinking about other people, and over again just really elevating themselves above everybody else. And I feel like this is just a little snapshot of that.
Yeah, and Hezekiah, as the best king, still needs a savior or Messiah to overcome his shortcoming, and that's our story as well.
Which is forever.
I think Hezekiah has Haggai syndrome. He stopped giving careful thought to his ways after he heard that it was going to be comfortable in his lifetime. But I think that's the call, is give careful thought to your ways. And even when you feel secure, what are you doing? What's next? And it ties all that together. Like you can sit in security, not security. You can sit in the comfort and just be and go, that's good. Or you can think about, what will this do? What's next? And I think that that's a good lesson for us, is to call back to Haggai and realize that we got to give careful thought to our ways. and see what God's doing and be a part of it.
Cool.
I like it.
See you guys next week.
Bye.